On a night in 2008, 16-year-old Ying Shing, who lived in Kulai, Malaysia, was getting ready to head home after her usual work shift. Little did she know that tragedy was silently looming. This case, the kidnapping of Kulai High School's beauty queen, would go on to shock all of Malaysia and make front-page headlines across major newspapers at the time. What exactly happened behind this case? Born in 1992 in Malaysia's Johor state, Ying Shing attended Sultan Ibrahim High School in Kulai district. She was the third child in her family, with two older sisters and a younger brother. Though her family wasn't well off, Ying Shing was naturally beautiful. She always took great care with her appearance, putting thought into her hairstyles and outfits, which led to her being recognized as the school's beauty queen. Beyond her striking looks, Ying Shing was also an exceptional student with impressive academic achievements. She had scored remarkably well on her junior high school assessment exams. Additionally, she had studied dance since childhood and became an active member of the school's cheerleading team. One could say Ying Shing had it all. She was truly a well-rounded student who possessed both natural beauty and admirable artistic talent. Despite her outstanding talents, Ying Shing was far from arrogant. Instead, she had a warm, genuine personality and often invited friends out for movies and meals, maintaining excellent social relationships. When friends spoke of her, they would say that with such a personality, it was impossible for anyone to dislike her. With her beauty and graceful demeanor, Ying Shing attracted many admirers and suitors. Her heart had found its place in a stable relationship. Understanding her family's financial situation wasn't comfortable, she decided to work part-time while studying to help her parents. After school, Ying Shing would work at a fashion store in a nearby shopping mall. With her gentle, obedient nature and friendly attitude, she quickly won over both her employer and regular customers. On September 11, 2008, Ying Shing went to the mall for her usual part-time shift. Around 10 p.m. at closing time, she waved goodbye to her co-workers and prepared to leave the mall to head home for rest. After a long day of studying and working, she was exhausted and had no energy left, completely unaware that stepping out of the mall would lead to a major turning point in her life. By 11 p.m., Ying Shing still hadn't returned home. Initially, her family thought she might have had some unexpected business and weren't too worried. However, as hours passed with no sign of her, the family began to realize something was wrong. Concerned that she might have met with an accident, they anxiously called the police. While the family spent a sleepless night worrying, at 6:20 a.m., Ying Shing's parents suddenly received a phone call. Seeing their daughter's number on the screen, they immediately answered, full of hope that they would finally learn of their daughter's situation. However, contrary to their expectations, the voice on the other end wasn't Ying Shing's, but rather the cold voice of an unknown man. The man on the phone told them that Ying Shing had been kidnapped. He demanded 60,000 Malaysian ringgit, approximately $12,800 at the time, as ransom, warning of consequences if they didn't comply. Upon hearing this, Ying Shing's parents immediately fell into panic, confirming their daughter had indeed met with misfortune. They promptly called the police again. After receiving the report, the police quickly formed a special task force, fully dedicating their resources to investigating this kidnapping. As mentioned earlier, Ying Shing's family wasn't wealthy, and gathering 60,000 Malaysian ringgit, approximately $12,800, in such a short time was extremely difficult for them. While the family was desperately trying to gather the money, the police were secretly conducting surveillance and investigation. After news of the kidnapping spread, one of Ying Shing's friends was shocked to learn about it. Having a close relationship with Ying Shing's parents, this friend stayed by their side throughout the ordeal. He not only patiently consoled them, but also repeatedly urged them to prepare the ransom quickly to prevent the kidnappers from harming Ying Shing due to any delay. Meanwhile, the kidnappers seemed extremely cautious, afraid of being tracked by the police. Each call to Ying Shing's parents lasted no more than 30 seconds, and they frequently changed the ransom drop-off location, trying to throw off the police investigation. Finally, the kidnappers set the ransom location near Jinhai Bay in Johor Bahru, about a 45-minute drive from Kulai near the Singapore border. After a long and tense day, the The family had only managed to gather 33,000 Malaysian ringgit, approximately 7,000 USD, still short of the kidnappers' demands. At 3 a.m., following the kidnappers' instructions, a close friend of Ying Shing placed this money in a bush at the designated spot. Worryingly, after the ransom was placed, they couldn't contact the kidnappers anymore. No trace of the kidnappers was found at the scene. Why had the kidnappers suddenly gone silent? Had they killed her to eliminate witnesses? In the midst of endless worry, the police accelerated their investigation. At 6:15 p.m. the same day, police successfully intercepted a four-wheeled vehicle on the road and quickly apprehended 3 young men inside. Following leads within an hour, they arrested 4 more young men for questioning. After initial interrogation, the police confirmed that 3 of the 7 individuals were not suspects and released them, continuing to detain the remaining 4 suspects. They were Tae Kim Hong, age 22, Leong Soon Long, age 17, Wong Soon Heng, and Wong Ka Wai, age 16. The police also seized a Malaysian-made Proton Kembara vehicle. Inside the car, police found the ransom money bag, still containing a significant amount of cash, further confirming their connection to the case. Upon deeper investigation, police discovered that all 4 suspects had dropped out of school. More shockingly, they all knew Ying Shing. And among these 4, the most surprising was one young man, the same person who had pretended to be a concerned friend staying by her parents' side after Ying Shing's kidnapping. This young man's unusual behavior after the incident, consistently trying to persuade the family to quickly pay the ransom, had raised suspicions with the family at the time and became an important lead for police to target him. Evidence proved he was indeed one of the key participants in this kidnapping. He was eventually arrested along with the others. However, which of the 4 he was specifically, we couldn't find in the official documents. After intense interrogation, the 4 suspects finally revealed the heartbreaking truth. 16-year-old Ying Shing had been killed. Her body had been dumped in some bushes at the Wild Princess Garden in Kulai. Upon learning this, police immediately went to the location indicated by the suspects. In the bushes, they found Ying Shing's body, with the lower half severely burned and part of her face also burned. Forensic examination confirmed this was indeed Ying Shing, who had been missing for several days. The autopsy results revealed that Ying Shing's cause of death was asphyxiation. There were no signs of sexual assault on the body. Forensic experts estimated she had been killed shortly after being kidnapped, with time of death exceeding 24 hours. The dump site was only about 330 feet from a highway toll booth. This vacant lot was rarely visited, overgrown with weeds, and aside from occasional illegal dumping, almost no one came here. At the scene, police not only detected the stench of decomposing remains, but also discovered a pit about 12 inches deep with clear signs of burning. This was evidently where the perpetrators had attempted to cremate the body to destroy evidence. However, the flames hadn't completely destroyed all evidence, and the truth was finally revealed. On November 24, 2008, Ying Shing's body was released from the morgue to her family. Her funeral was held in deep sorrow, with about 200 relatives, friends, and classmates attending. Police investigation revealed that the 4 arrested suspects had no prior criminal records and no weapons were found on them. What could have driven these young men to commit such a cruel act against Ying Shing? There were many theories about the perpetrators' motives, and the most credible hypothesis was that among the 4, the 22-year-old ringleader Tae Kim Hong had been strongly obsessed with Ying Shing, repeatedly expressing his romantic interest only to be consistently rejected. Unable to accept the humiliation of rejection, he finally conspired with the other 3 to secretly plan this kidnapping, attempting to possess Ying Shing through violence and use it for extortion. However, the brutality of the crime far exceeded anyone's imagination. They not only killed her after attempting to extort money, but also burned her body. Police speculated that these 4 feared Ying Shing would recognize them. If they released her, she would likely report them to the police. To cover up their crime, they ultimately decided to eliminate the witness. As mentioned earlier, Ying Shing had been in a relationship with her boyfriend for nearly a year. During their relationship, despite having many admirers, she always maintained appropriate boundaries and never gave her boyfriend cause for concern. However, about 2 months before the incident, Tae Kim Hong had frequently been harassing her through text messages and phone calls. Ying Shing felt very uncomfortable and had complained about this to her boyfriend. The boyfriend didn't intervene much, only comforting Ying Shing and telling her to be careful. He trusted that she was mature enough to handle romantic matters appropriately. However, this decision became the deepest regret of his life. Later, he admitted that he should have been more alert and taken action to protect Ying Shing. He also mentioned that he had suspected the kidnappers must have been people who knew both Ying Shing and himself, because after her kidnapping, they had used her phone to contact him. In Ying Shing's phone contacts, he was saved as boyfriend, yet the kidnappers were able to call him by his name. After learning of Ying Shing's kidnapping, her boyfriend also went everywhere trying to gather money, hoping to quickly save her. He even resorted to borrowing money, trying to meet the kidnappers' ransom demands. But in the end, what awaited him was a cold corpse and an irreversible outcome. He said he never imagined that the group of kidnappers who knew Ying Shing would actually choose to kill her to eliminate witnesses, turning an extortion attempt into a brutal tragedy. On September 25, 2008, the 4 suspects were formally charged with kidnapping and murder. However, due to the need to confirm forensic reports, DNA test results, and other evidence, the trial was postponed several times. It wasn't until 2010 that the case was finally tried at the Johor High Court. Under Malaysian law, those convicted of murder typically face the death penalty. However, the law stipulates that 2 categories of people cannot be sentenced to death regardless of their crime: pregnant women and minors. In this case, only Kim Hong, at 22, was an adult, while the other 3 suspects were minors. Therefore, even if convicted, the minors would face at most long-term imprisonment rather than the death penalty. After the trial began, the prosecution presented their charges, and the judge proceeded to rule on whether the charges were valid. Wong Ka-wai, age 16, was acquitted and released due to insufficient evidence for kidnapping and murder charges. The other 3, Tae Kim Hong, Leong Soon Long, and Wong Soon Heng, were found to have sufficient evidence against them and were required to defend themselves. Kim Hong, as the only adult, was the first to present his defense. He denied all criminal acts, declaring that at the time of the incident, he had not participated in either the kidnapping or murder and provided a detailed series of alibis. Kim Hong was an employee at a hair salon. He claimed that on the afternoon of the incident, he had lent his Kimbara to a friend who wanted to use it for a date with his girlfriend. Kim Hong said the friend didn't return the car until midnight the following day. The next morning, when Kim Hong was preparing to drive to work, he claimed he accidentally discovered Ying Shing's phone left in the car. He said the phone had no SIM card, so he thought of keeping it for himself. He then contacted 2 other suspects and met at a restaurant to plan selling the phone to a familiar phone store. Furthermore, Kim Hong mentioned that shortly after the incident, Wang Jian came to his hair salon to borrow the car again and paid 500 Malaysian ringgit, approximately 107 USD, as compensation. He also claimed that the black plastic bag found in the car was left by that friend and had nothing to do with him. However, police raised doubts about his alibi, particularly regarding the existence of this friend who borrowed the car. During the trial, police repeatedly asked Kim Hong for specific information about this friend, including his hometown, address, family members, etc. However, Kim Hong couldn't provide any specific details, only responding with, "I don't know." But when faced with relentless questioning, Kim Hong's defense revealed many holes and became increasingly difficult to explain coherently. As his defense continued to crumble, he began accusing the police of mistreatment. He claimed that during his detention, police had abused him and threatened his safety. For example, he alleged that police had used electric shocks to torture him and held his head underwater to force him to confess. He also claimed that the police had forced him to go to the body dump site, rather than him voluntarily showing them the location. The other 2 suspects, Leong Soon Long and Wong Soon Heng, also denied involvement in the murder at trial. They tried to minimize their roles, claiming they only played minor parts in the incident. However, Through the ransom money bag found in the car, Ying Shing's phone, and other evidence, the prosecution demonstrated that all three played significant roles in the crime. During the court proceedings, the defendants' testimonies clearly lacked credibility, and their attempts to shift blame only fueled public outrage. On February 21, 2011, the Johor High Court delivered its verdict against the three defendants, finding them guilty on both charges. The judge announced that final sentencing would take place on March 31st of the same year at the Kuala Lumpur High Court. During the sentencing, the judge severely condemned the three defendants, pointing out that despite their youth, they had used extremely cruel methods to take the life of 16-year-old Ying Shing, even attempting to burn her body to conceal their crime. The judge noted that the defendants showed absolutely no remorse, were extremely evil, and deserved the harshest punishment under the law. As for Kim Hong, who was 22 at the time of the crime, since he was found guilty of murder, he received a mandatory death sentence by hanging. Due to the additional kidnapping conviction, he received a second death sentence. Ying Shing's family attended throughout the trial process, hoping justice would be served, and expressed satisfaction with the final verdict. Although their daughter couldn't be brought back to life, at least the perpetrators had received appropriate punishment. Kim Hong appealed twice in 2013 and 2015, attempting to overturn his death sentence, but both appeals were rejected by the court. Subsequently, Kim Hong was held in prison awaiting execution. However, this case wasn't over yet. As time passed, the case gradually faded from public memory until 2023, when an unexpected turn in the verdict brought new attention and controversy to this once nationally shocking murder case. In April 2023, Malaysia officially passed legislation abolishing mandatory death sentences. This change gave many previously death-sentenced cases that hadn't been carried out the opportunity to appeal and be retried. Tae Kim Hong was among them. On May 16, 2024, Kim Hong's appeal was successful, and the case was retried at the Meilian State Court. His defense lawyer emphasized during the trial that Kim Hong had shown deep remorse for his actions, arguing that the burning of the body wasn't done out of cruelty, but rather to destroy evidence. The lawyer further argued that the relatively short duration of Ying Shing's strangulation should be considered a mitigating factor. Additionally, he pointed out that Tae Kim Hong was only 22 years old when the crime occurred, suggesting that his actions were due to youthful impulsiveness rather than being an irredeemable criminal. Despite strong calls from Ying Shing's family and public opinion to maintain the original sentence, the three judges of the Meilian State Court unanimously ruled Tae Kim Hong was sentenced to 40 years in prison and 17 strokes of the cane, 5 strokes for kidnapping and 12 for murder. This ruling sparked widespread controversy. Ying Shing's family expressed deep disappointment with the court's decision, feeling it couldn't compensate for the loss of their loved one. The family also revealed that in the 16 years since the incident, they had never received any expression of remorse or apology from the perpetrator or his family. They are even worried about potential retaliation when the perpetrator completes his sentence and is released. Some legal professionals even publicly wrote that reducing Kim Hong's sentence could diminish society's faith in judicial justice. Although the abolition of mandatory death sentences has become an established fact and many old cases are being reviewed regarding Tae Kim Hong's verdict, the dust has settled and there will be no further changes. Next is a case that took place in Tiandao City, Hubei Province, China. On September 7, 2000, Guodu, a 45-year-old man living in Tianmen Township, Tiandao City, Hubei Province, was feeling elated after securing a job at a power plant. However, his joy was tempered by sadness, as he would have to leave his family to work in the city, leaving behind his 36-year-old wife Meilian and their 11th grade son, Zhao Mingjun. Because Meilian was a beautiful woman with an easygoing personality, Guodu felt uneasy about leaving his wife alone at home. But wanting to provide a better life for his family, he decided to take the job. After his first week of work, everything seemed to be going well for Guodu. He would call his wife and son as soon as his shift ended, and in the evenings he would chat with his wife again. He thought to himself that if he could work hard for a few years and save up some capital, he could return home to open a business and be with his family. On September 15th, while Guodu was at work as usual, he unexpectedly received a text message from his son Mingjun. The boy said he wanted to come to the city to work and help share his parents' financial burden. This news shocked Guodu. Why would his son want to quit school to work? Zhao Mingjun was an introverted person who rarely socialized with friends. Such a drastic change in his son's mindset suggested that either there was conflict between mother and son, or something had happened to Mingjun at school. Since his wife didn't have a phone at home, Guodu contacted their neighbors, asking them to let him speak with his wife so he could understand why their son was thinking this way. However, the neighbors informed him that his wife had already left for work, but they would help him reach her in the evening. At this point, Guodu couldn't focus on his work, having only been away for a week, and already problems were arising at home. When lunchtime came, Guodu tried calling his son but couldn't get through. A sense of unease began to overwhelm him. Guodu suddenly remembered he had saved the number of one of Meilian's co-workers, so he called them. However, they informed him that Meilian hadn't come to work that day. This made Guodu even more anxious, his mind drifting to his wife's attractive appearance and stirring doubts in his head. But then his wife's co-worker called back to explain that Meilian had mentioned yesterday she would take the day off to harvest cotton. This somewhat eased Guodu's mind. After a day filled with emotional ups and downs, when evening came, Guodu called his son again. Mingjun told him that his mother had left for work in the morning and still hadn't returned home, even though it was now 8 p.m. At this point, Guodu became furious and lost all focus on his work. He hastily borrowed a motorcycle from a friend and rushed home immediately. During the ride, Guodu's mind raced with thoughts, still unable to understand why his wife would leave early in the morning and not return by nightfall. He then recalled how Meilian had repeatedly urged him to take the city job. To reassure Guodu, Meilian had even voluntarily given him her mobile phone, wanting to prove she would stay faithfully at home so he shouldn't worry. However, Guodu hadn't taken the phone with him, instead turning it off and hiding it in a discreet spot in their bedroom. Upon reaching home in his distressed state, Guodu wanted to quickly discover his wife's whereabouts, wondering if something had happened to Meilian or if she was having an affair. He searched the house to see if she had taken any belongings or documents with her, but found all her personal items still in place. He then went to ask the neighboring households if anyone had seen his wife. A villager reported that at 7 a.m. that morning, he had coincidentally seen Meilian wearing a short skirt, hurriedly leaving the house. Hearing this, Guodu's mind completely collapsed. He was convinced his wife had betrayed him and left with someone else. When he questioned his son, Mingjun explained that since his father had left for work, his mother had been home every evening as usual. Only today she hadn't returned. Hearing this, Guodu regretted taking the city job. He had wanted a happy family, but now wondered if he even had a family anymore. He called relatives to ask about his wife's whereabouts, but no one had seen her. At this point, a middle-aged man near the village entrance reported that he had seen Meilian heading to the cotton fields that morning, but oddly, she was wearing a short skirt, strange attire for cotton harvesting. With this information, Guodu and others went to search the cotton fields. Although it was already 10 p.m., many villagers eagerly helped with the search. On a grassy path in the cotton field, they discovered Meilian's motorcycle, but where had she gone? After discussing the situation, thinking something might have happened to her, the group split up to search the cotton fields and nearby bushes. However, after searching, they still couldn't find any trace of Meilian. Worried about his wife, Guodu decided to call the police. About 10 minutes later, officers arrived at the cotton field where Meilian had disappeared. After examining the motorcycle and finding nothing unusual, and with villagers having already searched the surrounding area without success, the police suggested two possibilities. Either Meilian had left with someone else, or she had met with misfortune. By this time, it was quite late, so the police took the motorcycle to the station for examination. The next morning, they quickly formed an investigation team. They brought police dogs to search the cotton field area, near Meilian's field plot, and the secluded bushes. Despite the combined efforts of villagers, police, and police dogs, they still found no trace of her. At this point, police theorized that Meilian might no longer be in the cotton field area and had gone elsewhere. After analyzing and investigating the area, they discovered that although this was agricultural land, its location was quite remote, with only about 10 households living nearby. If Meilian had met with foul play, it would have been difficult for anyone to notice. The location of her parked motorcycle confirmed she had definitely been there, but her sudden disappearance suggested either she had left with someone or had been killed and her body hidden elsewhere. Otherwise, the police dogs would have detected something. The presence of Meilian's motorcycle at the scene ruled out robbery as a motive. The police narrowed their investigation to 3 possibilities. Either this was a revenge killing, she had been abducted by a sexual predator and was being held somewhere, or she had gone to meet a lover, which would explain her wearing attractive clothing to the fields that morning. To investigate these theories, police began looking deeper into Meilian's life and relationships. Through interviews with family members and villagers, they learned she was a hard-working, skilled woman known for her beauty in the village. She got along well with everyone and had no conflicts. However, there was a notable detail. About 2 years ago, when Guodu had fallen seriously ill, Meilian would frequently leave home early and return late. Additionally, the 10-year age gap between the couple was a topic of village gossip. People often teased Guodu that with such a young and beautiful wife, he needed to be careful or she might leave him for someone else. These comments had weighed heavily on Guodu's mind when deciding to take the city job. However, according to many villagers, Meilian had always been content with her marriage and never complained about her husband. She lived happily with the love she had chosen. Meilian worked as a server at a hotel in town, which led some to question whether she might have formed relationships at work, especially during Guodu's illness. To investigate this possibility, police went to the hotel and learned that Meilian had requested September 7th off to harvest cotton. The hotel owner was shocked to hear about Meilian's disappearance. According to her, Meilian was a very professional employee. Although she occasionally received advances from male guests, she always politely declined them. The owner emphasized that having known Meilian's character through her long employment there, she was certain Meilian would never be unfaithful to her husband. Throughout her time working there, she had never had any conflicts with co-workers or guests. Based on the evidence collected, police eliminated 2 possibilities: a revenge killing and Meilian running away with a lover. This led to the conclusion that she was likely killed in the cotton field. However, despite days of searching by both police and villagers, they couldn't find the victim. Police hypothesized that the body might be hidden in one of the ponds or swamps around the field. With this theory, police forces were deployed to expand the search area, focusing on the ponds and swampy areas in the region. They used poles to probe the deep water holes in the field, pools that farmers had dug for water storage. As teams searched throughout the field, they made a heartbreaking discovery. In grass over 3 feet tall, an officer found the naked body of a woman. After checking the body, Guodu confirmed it was his wife, Meilian. Seeing his wife so brutally murdered, Guodu cried out in anguish, tears streaming down his face as grief overwhelmed him. At the crime scene, police determined that Meilian had been killed elsewhere before her body was hidden here. The body was completely unclothed, and the grass around it showed no signs of being crushed. This was a secluded area known only to local residents, suggesting the perpetrator lived near the cotton field. During the autopsy, the medical examiner discovered that part of the victim's genitalia had been mutilated, indicating the killer's cruel and deranged nature. Meilian had 2 wounds to her head, one deep cut, and another likely caused by the handle of a blade. This indicated the murder weapon was a knife. The time of death was determined to be around 7:30 a.m. on September 7th. Meilian had been sexually assaulted before death, with bruising on her arms showing she had struggled during the attack. Despite thorough searches, police could not locate Meilian's clothes, personal belongings, or the murder weapon. Based on the crime scene, police theorized that Meilian likely knew her attacker, as she appeared to have let her guard down. The knife wound suggested a weapon approximately 20 inches long and 4 inches wide. Such a large knife would be difficult to conceal and would have to be carried openly. If a stranger had approached Meilian with such a weapon, she would likely have been more defensive, making it harder for the attacker to strike so decisively. Police immediately investigated Meilian's social connections and learned she only knew villagers and co-workers. Her workplace was staffed entirely by women, who were ruled out as suspects. Though Meilian was beautiful, she lived a virtuous life and never stayed out overnight. News of Meilian's murder plunged the village into fear and uncertainty. Nothing so horrific had ever happened there before. Various rumors began circulating through the village. Police began narrowing their investigation, focusing first on the male villagers for leads. During the investigation, a 30-year-old man named Tujie reported seeing Mr. Ying, another villager, in the cotton field during the time of the murder. While police were gathering additional information, Tujie's parents seemed reluctant to let their son cooperate with investigators, perhaps fearing trouble for their family. Police had to seek information from others. However, when leaving the house, one investigator noted that Tujie's information seemed credible since his window directly overlooked the crime scene, allowing him to see anyone in the cotton field. Police immediately visited Ying's home. During questioning, he stated that at 7:30 a.m. on September 7th, he was feeding fish at a pond about 1.2 miles from the crime scene. After finishing, Ying returned home by motorcycle around 8 a.m. before heading to work in the cotton field. Meanwhile, Meilian had gone to the cotton field at 7 a.m. Police reconstructed the timeline to determine if Ying had the opportunity to commit the crime. Based on travel times, since Meilian was killed at 7:30 a.m. and Ying didn't return home until 8 a.m. before going to the field, he couldn't have committed the murder. Ying also provided another crucial piece of information. At 8:30 a.m., while working in the field, he saw Tujie walking back from the cotton field looking dazed. This surprised investigators since Tujie hadn't mentioned this in his previous interview. Additionally, 85-year-old Mr. Yang reported that at 7:46 a.m. on the day of the murder, while fishing at a pond in the field, he saw Tujie walking toward the crime scene. About 10 minutes later, he heard a woman's cry for help. Initially, he thought he had misheard and didn't pay much attention. After interviewing all villagers, police found no other leads. 3 men were near the crime scene when the murder occurred: Tujie, Ying, and Mr. Yang, and one of them had to be the killer. However, Mr. Yang, given his advanced age, was physically incapable of overpowering Meilian. Therefore, Mr. Yang was the first to be eliminated as a suspect. Next, police experiments showed Ying couldn't have committed the murder due to the timeline, so he too was cleared. This left only Tujie, a 30-year-old single man who became the prime suspect. Although he was the first to provide information to police, he hadn't mentioned his own presence in the field, instead only naming others who were there. Secondly, Tujie's parents' unusually anxious behavior during police questioning suggested they knew something concerning. When police returned to question Tujie again, his parents still objected. Only when police revealed they suspected their son of involvement in the murder did they agree to cooperate. During the second interrogation, police asked Tujie about his activities between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. on the morning of the incident. He claimed he was having breakfast and returned home at 8 a.m., then did some odd jobs. To verify his story, police visited the restaurant he mentioned. However, the owner said it was too busy to remember specific customers and didn't recognize Tujie. Unable to confirm his breakfast alibi, police reviewed surveillance footage from a store near the school and found no sign of Tujie during that time period. Since this camera covered the only road out of the village and Tujie never appeared on it, they knew he was lying. Based on Ying's and Yang's statements placing Tujie at the crime scene, plus his attempts to mislead investigators, police immediately brought him in for questioning. Another team investigating Tujie's background learned he was lazy and never helped his parents with work. So why was he in the field that day? He must have had other motives. Most importantly, at 30 years old, single and physically fit, he was capable of overpowering and killing Meilian. During 3 hours of interrogation, Tujie continued lying. But when investigators proved his statements false, he finally confessed to killing Meilian on the morning of September 7th. Following his confession, police found the murder weapon and Meilian's clothes buried in mud near a pond by the crime scene. What drove him to murder Meilian? According to 2G's confession, he was a shy, introverted person. 2 years prior, he had lost his job and moved back in with his parents. During this time, he did nothing productive, leading villagers to call him useless, an adult still dependent on his parents. This deeply angered 2G, and he sought to release his mounting pressure. On the morning of September 7th, upon waking, 2G looked through his window and saw Meilian's attractive figure as she harvested cotton. When she bent over, her backside was facing him, and she was wearing a short skirt that day. This triggered his perverted desires. Combined with his anger at being ridiculed by neighbors, he decided to take out his rage on Meilian. 2G went downstairs, grabbed a knife, and headed straight to where Meilian was working. While she was focused on picking cotton, she didn't see him as a threat since he was a fellow villager, assuming he was just there to work. When he got close, he struck her head with the blunt side of the knife, immediately disorienting her. He then covered her mouth and dragged her into the grass, where he sexually assaulted her to vent his anger. Finally, 2G delivered a fatal blow to Meilian's head, killing her instantly. Afterward, he buried her clothes and the murder weapon in mud and dragged Meilian's body to different bushes to hide it. In his confession, 2G said he felt terrified and deeply remorseful after committing the crime. Everything seemed too late to undo, so he kept trying to mislead investigators. However, justice prevailed, and the criminal ultimately paid for his cruel actions. On October 26th, at 2G's trial for sexual assault and murder, he was sentenced to death. After the case concluded, many villagers were shocked, painfully realizing that killers could be living right next door, like ticking time bombs waiting to explode. Several members of 2G's family partially blamed Meilian, questioning why she dressed so sexy, suggesting that if she had dressed more modestly that day, the incident wouldn't have happened. However, many others argued the crime was entirely 2G's fault, a vicious, evil person who couldn't control his desires and anger. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your opinions in the comments below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.